Hey everybody, how's it going? Oh no. Hey everybody. That shouldn't have happened. Stop. What are you doing? Oh no. Okay. I fixed it, but there's going to be a little echoes going on for a little bit. I am not feeling good today. Felt bad yesterday too. Today the headache was a little bit better, but the rest of it was worse. Hey, Cynthia, Misty, Jennifer, good to see ya. Been missing you on Sundays. Luana, good to see you. Sorry I missed you the last 2 weeks. Sorry about that. Jimmy, good to see ya. You feeling better, Cynthia? Candace, I hope you and Joel are doing okay. Evelyn, good to see you. Janice, hope you and Dave are doing well. Carol, hope you and Dave are doing well. You read the text. I didn't think anybody would actually read it since it's normally the same. I edited it just a little bit. Yeah, we are absolutely going to hire a nursery worker, Jennifer. It is my #1 priority for church right now, so it'll happen soon. But I understand that completely. Absolutely #1 priority. And very grateful that we have the need. We've got some really cool stuff Caleb would like if we could get somebody who was trained in godly play, but we can have fun anyway. So I will fix that. I'm putting it in writing. See? Now it's in writing. Luana, we are in Genesis 9. One. You know, I do what I call on-the-fly teaching. So I study, usually the Monday or Tuesday, I study what I'm teaching. I accidentally studied ahead a lot. So this will really be on-the-fly learning. I was a whole chapter ahead. But that's okay. Genesis I know fairly well. Jennifer's baby is 7 years old and in second grade, Sarah. So he is pretty big. If that's to whom you were referring. And my babies are all gone as of tomorrow. Although I don't think Connor would approve of being called a baby. He'll be 19 September 2nd. Very close to being empty nesters. One day. Cheryl's dreading it. I'm not looking forward to it quite as much as I thought I would, but I'll survive. I'm going to miss having stuff going on all the time, though, to be honest. Maybe. I'll miss it for a little bit. It'll be different. But it just makes it that much more fun when they come home. All right, we'll get going in about 4 minutes. See who else pops on between now and then. I love the crowd we have on Tuesday nights. Greetings to those of you over on YouTube. Glad you're with us. And we've got a couple people on the phone as well. Glad that you could join us. YouTubers Janice says hello to you all. Interesting stuff going on in Genesis 9:1. We haven't started yet, Sarah, but I mean, I'm on screen and it's not saying starting soon. So I'm guessing you can't hear this. So I'm going to tell you to refresh your browser or shut down your mobile app and start it again. Cynthia, you might have to text that to her if she can't see it. Okay, she saw it. Anything exciting happen at work today, Misty? I actually stayed home today, which is kind of unusual for me for a Tuesday. I think. There you go. Always good to, if you're on a browser, you can hit Control R or Command R if you're on Mac, or you can hit F5 and it'll just reload the page. If you're on mobile, the only thing I know to do is close the app and start it again. Thank you, Janice. I know ragweed's been up lately, so could just be that I'm having some allergies. You just never know, do you? All right, we are going to get started just as soon as I finish solving this Rubik's Cube. Okay, all done. Thank you, Janice. All right, let's get cooking on Genesis 9:1. So not too hard to know where we're at. The flood happened, the waters receded, some interesting symbology going on. And I just want to be very open with you. I'm viewing this flood story as if it is a mythology that the Israelites wrote with the attempt of explaining the human condition. I don't think that they wrote this part of Genesis, or really any part of Genesis, any significant part of Genesis to be written as a history book, but rather a collection of mythologies. It fits with that. Now, there are people who believe that everything that happened in Genesis is completely literal, and I've always made it the case that when I teach Old Testament, the lessons that I teach can be true whether they're literal or whether they're mythological or ideological or any number of logicals. But I want to be open about the fact that I don't think that it was the intention of the writers of the book of Genesis to, I don't think they ever expected people to take these stories literally. I think they were expected to be understood as mythologies. That's my opinion. That opinion is unprovable. So it is either correct or it is incorrect, and there is no way to know which it is. So like I said, I always endeavored to teach a truth with a capital T, and that truth, I don't think I've ever had a case where that truth would be nullified by having one belief or the other. But just letting you know where I'm coming from. It does seem odd when they start getting very specific. I think you could make a pretty good argument that somebody thinks when they wrote it thought it was literal, like when they say in the second month on the 27th day of the month the earth was dry. I mean, that's oddly specific for a mythology. I will grant you that. Anyway, there is some symbology in the fact that Noah sends out a raven first and then sends out a dove. And when the dove comes back with a freshly plucked olive leaf, Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. He waited another 7 days and he sent the dove out again, and it didn't return to him anymore. And then he ended up sacrificing a dove too. So he lost 2 doves. But remember, one of the authors, the priestly author, or maybe the Yahwehist, I forget at this point, said that all the clean animals, and the dove was certainly a clean animal. The dove was one of the most sacrificed animals. There were 7 pairs each. Now, of course, we know that with the size of the ark, that Not all the animals could fit on there, but anyway, nonetheless, I don't know what to make of the raven versus the dove. I think it'd be really neat to dig into that, but I like to go deep, but I don't want to go that deep. What we do know is that the dove is a gentle creature that's had the symbolism of peace, even back here in the book of Genesis. Hey, Ben, no problem for being late. It's good to see you. So that's what happened. And then in Genesis 8:13, we're just going over what we talked about before. Now we have this is a different author, and he has a different date that the things happened on. Again, I don't know what to make of that. In the 600th year, in the first month, on the first day of the month, so January, our equivalent of our January 1st, I guess. The waters were dried up from the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark. So he had a nice little sunroof, and he looked and saw that the face of the ground was drying. So he waited the second month on the 27th day of the month, and he saw that the earth was dry. So that makes, according to our calendar, 57 days. And if you took out the Sundays, as they often did, that would be 48 days. So nothing significant about that. But of course, our calendar doesn't match up with the calendar they used then. So I was just curious to see almost 50 days. Anyway. It's interesting to me because numerology is so important in the Old Testament. However, it's not really that important to me, so I've never dug into it, but there's some pretty neat stuff in there. So God said to Noah, "Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and your son wives with you. An albino raven that's born will live their life alone because no other raven will breed with it." I did not know that. Not even another albino raven? Racist ravens. "Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth. Be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So Noah's given the same command that Adam and Eve were given, to be fruitful. So Noah went out with the sons and his sons' wives, and every animal and every creeping thing and every bird and every thing that moves on the earth went out of the ark by families. Noah built an altar, and remember, God said that he would never again curse the ground because of humankind, because humans were just evil from their youth. There was nothing to be done about it. Wiping everybody out and starting over didn't really accomplish anything because human beings were still wretched. Now, this is a case where, again, I view this from a mythological point of view, and what's going on is the Israelites are looking around at the society that they see, and it's not good. It's not a good society. There's lots of evil in the world, and part of their, the human conditioning, again, we talked about this before. We are a creation that is in entropy. Creation naturally moves towards chaos, unless it's has energy exerted on it from an outside force. And that outside force for us can be God. It can also be us. Certain things we do push us faster towards chaos, towards the natural sort of decreation. And some things we do help slow down that process of entropy and help return some order to systems of chaos. But clearly, when the Israelites are writing this, the Israelites have a history of being in the land, being kicked out of the land, being in the land, being kicked out of the land. By the time this was written down, that had happened to them many, 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 many times. And they had this theology that said if bad things happened to people, they were bad people. So they looked around the world and they saw a lot of bad things happening. And so they assumed that there were a lot of bad people in the world. Now, I don't think that's a bad assumption, but I think the way that they get there is incorrect, because this Deuteronomistic theology, the idea that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, is obviously not true. Jesus says it's not true. But it is the operating theology, certainly, of the authors of Genesis and of the early Israelites and of the disciples when they're walking around with Jesus. They still have that idea. Lord, who sinned that this man was born blind, him or his parents? I mean, they definitely still have that idea. A big part of what Jesus did was corrective theology, teaching people that that's not how God operates. So I guess they're looking around, and in their mind, the flood was kind of pointless, because, if God wiped out the world because the inclination of humanity was moving towards chaos, nothing really changed after that. In fact, we're going to see how quickly nothing changed after that. And yet God doesn't make mistakes. God doesn't change God's mind. According to what we believe doctrinally about God. So the Israelites are stuck with a real mystery here. And so from my reading, my perspective, my understanding of this, they're just looking at the world around and they're thinking God must have decided that he wouldn't wipe out the world again, because if he wiped it out once, he certainly would have wiped it out again. And we can look around today, and if God wanted to start over, now would be as good of a time as any. But God has made a covenant with us not to do that. And so we can look at, hey, Shirley, good to see you. We can look at humanity from the earliest times that we have in our histories, including scripture and non-scriptural sources, all the way to 2021. And we can see that the inclination of the human heart is evil from its youth. Lots of horrible things going on in the world today. Some of it's evidence of a fallen creation, and some of it is evidence of a fallen humanity. So, Genesis 9, God blessed Noah and his sons. So remember, of all the people that were on the earth, Noah was the only one who was worthy. And also remember, because this is important, that Noah was a descendant of Seth. So Cain and Abel were the first two human beings born. It's raining outside, isn't it? Cain and Abel were the first two human beings born. Adam and Eve were created, so they're the first humans, and you can see that the human condition is wrecked from the very beginning. So Cain kills Abel. Cain is exiled, and God makes a promise that no one's going to kill Cain. And I think in some retrospect about that, I wonder if that's not a punishment. I wonder if Cain would have preferred to have just been killed. He said, this punishment is too much for me. You can't do this to me. Although he does also seem concerned that someone's going to kill him. But I think God doesn't want to let him off the hook. I think that the pockets of hell that we create and reveal, we are forced to live in, and that sin is its own punishment. At least in this earthly life. So Cain, by being forced to live for many, many years, he's forced to live with what he did to his brother. So then later, Adam and Eve conceive a third child named Seth. And then there's a genealogy that we kind of skipped over. But the important thing is that it goes down to Noah. Because there's obviously other human beings on the earth at this point, right? Because Cain, when it's just Cain and Abel, who were the first two ever born, theoretically, yes, Cain had lots of children. Cain had children, and there's a whole genealogy that goes all the way down from Cain. But keep in mind, Jennifer, that his entire line was wiped out in this flood. So according to, if we are going to take this literally, which again I'm not, but if we were, then Cain's entire bloodline was wiped out during this flood, because only Noah's bloodline is going to continue on. But again, the point I was getting to is that as soon as Cain is exiled, he goes and finds a wife, in a different land. So there were obviously other human beings around. So, after the flood, I think it's just as clear that there are other human beings around. But let's go with the text and just see what the text says. Hey, Sue from St. Joe Mo, good to see you. So keeping in mind that Noah was the only one that God found worthy, and his sons and their wives were also good enough to sort of reboot the human race. God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of dread of you shall rest on every animal on the earth." This is really interesting. The fear and dread of you shall rest on every animal of the earth and every bird of the air and on everything that creeps on the ground. So we're kind of back to the priestly author here he makes that division. There's 3 different kinds of animals. There's animals that walk on legs. There's animals that are creepy and crawly. And there's, I guess that's actually one type. I'm sorry. There's land dwelling animals, sea dwelling animals, and air flying animals. Those 3 classifications. And now this is interesting because here in verse 3, God says to Noah, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And just as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything." So that makes it seem that up until this point, we've talked about this quite a bit. I don't know that it's important, but I don't want to lose track of it because it's there. It almost seems that up until this point, they were still vegans, right? That they were only eating plants, but they were raising animals. And yet Abel had sheep, and when it came to giving offering to God, he knew how to prepare that sheep into food because he gave God the really good parts, the fatty parts, the equivalent of the ribeye, good marbled lamb meat. So if Abel knew what was the good part of the food, then that makes me think that he probably ate the food. And also he was a shepherd, which means he protected the sheep, right? He's an archetypical hero. He had a slingshot, presumably, and a stick and a rod, and he protected the sheep from other aggressive animals. So the animals definitely were carnivorous. But that relationship, that violence that animals have towards each other, that inclination, is one that human beings share, right? Because Cain killed his brother. And then he says, "I give you everything, only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is blood." Okay, that's a really good thing to say, I guess. So medium rare for everything. "For your own lifeblood, I will surely require a reckoning. From every animal I will require it, and from human beings, each one for the blood of another, I will require a reckoning for human life." So in this, God is saying that animals will be violent towards humans, and when they are, God will take care of it. God, if an animal kills a human, then God is going to require the life of that animal. If a human kills a human, God is going to require a human life for that spilling of that blood. Again, this is what the Israelites believed. And the law that they had definitely said an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that sort of thing. Jesus says that. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I say, turn the other cheek. So again, they had this law that they felt like was given from God. And then Jesus comes along and says, yeah, but that wasn't really what that wasn't the concept. That wasn't the idea. That was the letter of the law, but it wasn't the spirit of the law. He continues, whoever sheds the blood of a human, by a human, that person's blood will be shed. For in his own image, God made humankind, and you be fruitful and multiply and abound the earth and multiply in it. So here we basically have God saying capital punishment is on the table. And keep in mind, at least these two things, okay? Number one, this is what the early Israelites believed about God. And we know, and number two, we know that they made mistakes about the nature of God. Okay, those two things are very important. But the command is still there to be fruitful and multiply and abound on the earth and multiply in it. Then God said to Noah and his sons with him, as for me, I'm establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the domestic animals, and every animal of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. I established my covenant with you. This is the first covenant that's in the Bible. This is the first time God makes a promise to the people that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not particularly comforting in and of itself to me. But here we're going to have a little bit of an etiology. Remember, an etiology is an explanation of how things came to be. God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all generations. I've set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant, as if God needs to be reminded, right? But again, this is what the Israelites believed about God. I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I'll see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So that's sort of three different times that God says the same thing. And basically the bow that's set in the clouds is what we call a rainbow. And so every time there's a rainbow, so basically how do you get a rainbow? There's got to be moisture in there. It's almost always because of rain, even if it's, up in the atmosphere and we don't see it right where we're at. It's the sun shining through the rain, showing us the spectrum of colors that we see. Red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, and violet. Roy B. Jiv, or something like that. So basically, if it starts raining, God's going to make it stop raining. And when that happens, often there's a rainbow in the clouds. So the people believed that every time they looked up in the sky and saw the rainbow, it's because maybe God was thinking about flooding the earth again, but he stopped because that rainbow reminded God of his promise. Again, this is just an etiology. It's explaining why there are rainbows because they didn't understand the science behind it. So it's a beautiful etiology. It's poetic. But there it is. The sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and I want to say this right. Japheth. Okay, Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. Yeah, Luana, that's why I said that, God saying he'll never again destroy the world by water doesn't really do a whole lot to comfort me. Certainly fire is, I think that comes from Revelation. Sorry. Second Peter 3. Dear friends, remember this one thing: with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are as one day. And by the way, a lot of people have tried to use this literally, going back when God created the world in 7 days. They say it actually took 7,000 years. That's silliness. These are numbers that are just thrown out there in the same way that we would. If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. The Lord is not slow about keeping his promises, as some people think. He's waiting for you. The Lord doesn't want any person to be punished forever. He wants all people to be sorry for their sins and turn from them. The day of the Lord will come as a robber comes. The heavens will pass away with a loud noise. The sun and the stars will burn up. The earth and all that is in it will be burned up. So, according to Peter, it'll be fire next time. Certainly, as I was growing up in the 80s and listening to preachers preach, it was all about nuclear war and about how God was ready to wipe us all out and start over again. But who knows? According to scriptures, it's not going to be from a flood. Yeah, earthquakes are certainly doing their damage in certain parts of the world. We need to pray for Haiti. All right, so this is really important. The sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. Now, Canaan should be familiar to you because the Canaanites are evil people that conquered the Israelites over and over again. Again, I apologize. I told you I looked at the wrong verse of this. I was ready to move forward with the Tower of Babel, so this is my mistake. I'm just looking over it. Israel refers to both a people within Canaan and later to the political entity formed by those people. To the authors, Canaan is the land which the tribes of Israel conquered after an exodus from Egypt, and the Canaanites are the people they disposed from this land. So I said it backwards. The Israelites destroyed the Canaanites. All right, so Ham is one of, I guess not, Ben. I misspoke when I said that. The Canaanites, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't prepare the correct part today. I'm also a little embarrassed that I don't just know this. But God pledged the land in Genesis 12, which is going to come up not too long. Genesis 12:7, God is going to pledge the land of Canaan to Abraham. So the Israelites are going to invade the land of Canaan. Okay, keep that in mind, and keep in mind that this Canaan is the child of Ham, who is the son of Noah. So that genealogy is very important. No, the Canaanites weren't, Janice, but we'll get to that part when they when Israel sends spies over. It's the Anakim in Genesis 23, who were described as a race of giants descended from Anak. They lived in the southern part of the land of Canaan near Hebron. But see, this is pretty cool stuff, right? This is where the mythology and the stories and all it gets really interesting. So I like the questions, and I'm more than happy to make sure that I'm not speaking incorrectly. So again, I just want to make sure we get this genealogy correct. The sons of Noah were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan. I mean, this is important enough that the author of Genesis is telling us ahead of time, certainly the Israelites would have known exactly who Canaan was and who the Canaanites were, and they wouldn't have had to have looked it up. So these three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was peopled. Okay? So interesting, but unlikely. But again, this is what the Israelites believed. Here is the part that I actually looked at, which I thought wasn't all that important. And so I moved ahead, but this is the part where I'm prepared from. So Genesis 9:20, Noah, a man of the soil. Now I think that's really interesting. Abel was a man of the sheep, right? He tended to animals, and Cain was a man of the soil. And Noah, who's been charged with keeping all of these animals alive, it turns out is actually a farmer too. He's a man of the soil. He was the first to plant a vineyard, okay? And so the first thing that he did when he planted his vineyard was get some grapes. And the first thing he did with his grapes was make some wine. And the first thing that he did with his wine was drink it and become drunk and fall asleep, pass out naked in his tent. I think it's significant, again, and here's a perfect example, whether this is literal or whether this is mythology. I think it's significant that the Israelites believed that the man in whom God placed all of his trust to repopulate the earth, the first thing that he really does once he gets settled is grow some grapes so he can make some wine and get drunk. I mean, obviously this would take years, right? Like, I don't think you can plant. I'm curious. I'm going to look it up. How long does it take to grow grapes to make wine? I know a little bit about wineries. It can take a full 3 years to get the initial planting of a brand new grapevine through the first harvest. And the first vintage might not be bottled for another 2 years after that. So in other words, this could be like 5 years later. But there's nothing that happened that was worth noting until, I mean, this is the next thing that Genesis tells us. Okay, so Ham, and again, the author of Genesis is going to remind us that Ham is the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. So he went in and saw his father drunk and naked and giggled about it and went out and told Shem and Japheth and was laughing about him and making fun of him. Okay? There's a little dove in my... That's bizarre. In my online Bible, there's a dove under the word then. Anyway, then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both of their shoulders. They walked backwards to cover the nakedness of their father without seeing him. So remember, I think we've well established that being naked is not good for the Israelites. It's bad. It's evil. The first thing that Adam and Eve noticed when they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was that they were naked and they covered themselves up. So being naked was evil. So for Noah to get drunk and pass out naked would be embarrassing, certainly. But they respect their father so much that they put this cloth on their shoulders and they back in and cover up their father so that they don't see him naked. It's that important to them. So Ham's making fun of him for being naked. But Shem and Japheth take it very seriously and they make sure that they cover him up without seeing it. So when Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, lowest of slaves shall he be to his brother." He also said, "Blessed by the Lord my God be Shem, and let Canaan be his slave. May God make space for Japheth, and let him live in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his slave." All right, does that Does that seem like a lot to anybody? I mean, come on. Noah's the one who got drunk. Noah's the one who passed out naked. The only thing that Ham did was go in and snicker about it and then go tell his brothers. And because of this, he's cursing his son. Not even Ham. He's so upset with Ham that he's basically cursing his son into slavery for the rest of his life. Come on, this is yeah, I mean, that's exactly the case, Ben. That's an appropriate use of that word. Is this the God? Is this the God that we know? Is this the God that we worship? Is this the God that sent his only son that the world might not be condemned, but that everyone who believed in him would be saved? Well, this is what the Israelites thought that God was like. Because look, what happens eventually, right, is that the Israelites go in and they conquer the land of Canaan, living on a promise that God gave to Abraham, that he would give him the land of Canaan. So they would assume, right? They would assume that Canaan did something really bad. But also remember what the disciples said to Jesus. Jesus, who sinned that this man was born blind, him or his parents? So they believed 2,000 years ago, the disciples of Jesus Christ believed that God would force a man to be born blind because of something his parents did. They believed wholeheartedly that Genesis 9:24 through 27 was literal. It's interesting to me that the biggest sin they could come up with that he committed was being the son of a man who laughed at his father for getting drunk and passing out naked. I guess they took that honor your mother and father very seriously. You know, when Moses is told that his punishment for, and I've said in my sermons about Moses that I don't really think this is a punishment, but at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses is told that he's not going to get to cross over into the promised land because he got angry and struck a rock, because he was angry at the whiny, constantly griping about everything, faithless Israelites. That doesn't make any sense either. We'll get to that, and I don't want to skip ahead of it, but God forced them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years so they would all die. I mean, I don't think God would punish Moses for getting mad and striking a rock with a staff. I also don't think that Moses being given rest and being freed from having to go into the promised land with the descendants of that group of people is really punishment. But we'll get to that when we get to it. That's where we're looking ahead. I'm just trying to get the point across, this twofold point that I want you to remember. This is what the Israelites believed about God, and that what the Israelites believed about God wasn't true. Jesus said so. Some things were correct, some things were incorrect. I suspect that we're not geniuses in the year 2021, and some of the things we believe about God are correct, and some of the things we believe about God are not correct. But certainly, we're not writing, I hope nothing that we're writing is going to end up becoming scriptured, revered by people in the future, at least nothing I'm writing. All right. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. And then Genesis 10, these are the descendants of Noah's son, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Children were born to them after the flood. Okay, so think about that. Children were born to them after the flood, okay? That means they had no children when the flood came. So if this 5-year time frame from when Moses would really be able to make wine is correct, or maybe he didn't care about bottling it up, so he did it as soon as the harvest was good after 2 or 3 years, Ham is a 2 or 3-year-old. Canaan, the son of Ham, is a 2 or 3-year-old when Noah curses him to be a slave to his uncles. I'm sorry. I just don't buy it. This is a description of how people understood God in the earliest written history of our theology. And I think they got it wrong. Jesus thought they got it wrong too. And then we have genealogy, which I'm not going to read. So if you want to go through and read those genealogies, and Jennifer, you can go back up and you can see the genealogies a little bit. Well, let me look real fast and make sure that it's actually there. Sorry, the story of Noah is like 4 chapters. I'm going back to look at Cain. Well, if you go back to Genesis 4:17, it just says Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and he built a city and named it Enoch after his son Enoch. To Enid was born Irad, and Irad was the father of, and that goes on. So back in Genesis 4:17, there's a genealogy of Cain, but it doesn't really matter because, again, they all get wiped out in the flood, according to the story where the genealogy exists. And so we have more genealogy, which I'm not going to go through, beginning in Genesis 10:2 all the way down to Genesis 10:32, which ends the chapter by saying, these are the families of Noah's son according to their genealogies and their nations, and from these nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. And that's where we're going to stop tonight. And then next week, we'll be ready to pick up with Genesis 11, which is one of my favorite stories. My whole window just refreshed for some reason, which is the story of the Tower of Babel. All right. Everybody cool with that? Everybody on the same page? Everybody struggling? If we're not struggling, we're not doing it right. This is some stuff that it's disturbing. We need to struggle with it. Thank you, Janice. Carol? Let's close with a prayer. If you have a prayer request, just drop it in the chat, and then we'll know to lift those requests up. Holy God, we thank you for this time. We thank you for this scripture, which forces us to think as we endeavor to understand what the Israelites believed. We are forced to examine what we believe. And there is value in both of those things. And so we give you thanks for the opportunity to explore this. And we really give you the thanks for the opportunity to explore this in community. We know the Bible was written by a community for a community, and that it should be studied by a community. And we really enjoy the community that we have who've assembled to read these stories, Lord. We pray that you keep our minds and our hearts open just as you keep our ears and our eyes open so that we can hear and see. We need our minds and our hearts open so that we can understand and so that we can learn. That understanding is not enough. We need to learn, to apply what we learn to our own lives. God, we lift up to you the world right now. We lift up to you Haiti that's reeling in the aftermath of these earthquakes. We lift up to you the Middle East region that is being overrun by the Taliban. We lift up to you those who are trying to escape from that. Our prayers will never suffice, God. We live in a world of chaos. Help us to be agents of your will. Help us to be agents who work against the natural and deliberate entropy of the world. And instead of accepting these pockets of hell that we live in, Lord, that you would make us creators and revealers of pockets of heaven, so that all of your children will come to know you and love you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah, teachers starting school tomorrow for sure. Pray for the college kids who are moving in, for the parents who aren't going to have kids around anymore. Pray for them all. Ben, do you have a class, or are you on a full-time substitute schedule, or do you actually have a class that you're teaching this year? Thank you, Sue. The last time I think we talked about it, you were subbing in Belton. Long-term computer science. Very cool. Very cool. I was a software developer for a decade before I went into ministry, and still keep up with all that kind of stuff as much as I can. All right, everybody. God bless you. Godspeed, and hope to see you on Sunday, either in church or online at 5 o'clock. And as always, thanks for watching.